Fellow travelers, join us on a journey into dissonance, a sense-making sojourn through humanist nightmare fuel. If you are receiving this transmission, then you too are part of the resistance.
I see you.
Hey, travelers. Good eggs can still be hard-boiled from the inside, and institutional trauma is the inside of a bubbling cauldron. In today's stream, Dr. Siraj and I discuss what it looks like for people affected by institutional trauma to work together and finally shift the locus of power. Whether from the inside looking out or from the outside staring in, we are all crushed by the same oppression. Does being from the opposite side of the proverbial tracks mean that social and civil servants cannot work alongside community members and advocates and leaders to give rise to the changes we all need? I don't believe it should, but you be the judge as we listen in now.
All right, everyone. Welcome once again. We are back. This is Humanist Nightmare Fuel, the stream that keeps on giving. With me tonight is
Nadine Pueros.
indeed peer developmental expert extraordinaire. I am Dr. Siraj. I am an alchemist of narrative intent, and we are going to take another dive tonight into the space of institutional trauma, slowly moving towards an understanding of religious trauma syndrome as a specific example of this. But you know, as we discussed in a previous episode around this topic, there are multiple spaces of institutional trauma because all things around us, culturally, socially, are institutionalized. They're institutions we consistently respond to every day. And there is a set of social expectations that those institutions place upon us. It's not just a one-way relationship. And those social institutional expectations have grown and grown and grown to the point where people are living lives of reactivity to constant institutional demands. And it's fucking maddening, right? Because most of the time, even if you meet or come close to meeting those demands, the institutional responsiveness, them keeping their end of the deal, is not there. Nadine, let's talk about housing. Let's talk about doing everything that housing, the local housing authority requires, and let's talk about how they don't keep up their end of the bargain. How did that go?
I mean, just specifically, I mean, I think like you can get a letter, like I have, you know, been here like several times, just where you do everything that you're supposed to do, fill out everything you're supposed to fill out, turn in everything you're supposed to turn in, every document and everything like that. And if somebody else loses it or stops working there or whatever the case is, like they just send you a really threatening letter. And so yeah, that obviously happened to me, and I went up there to address that and was turned away, like, oh well, you got to come back in like an hour and a half. You know, I walked in there like obviously like with my helmet and everything on, like I was riding my bike, and like everybody is in a meeting. Every single person that works here is in the meeting, including me, who's sitting up at the front desk, and I can hear the meeting going like on Zoom. So, you know, I just
So that's okay. So let's just jump right into it.
Mhm.
That brings up an interesting point. And that is that institutions are comprised of people. Organizations are comprised of people, corporations are comprised of people, and there's definitely a particular type of institutional effect that can be, identified or connected to multiple institutions. Let's think about housing as an institution. Housing has the effect of you going into places of adversity or risk, or having trouble in some way that with the process of subsidized managed housing, and it puts your livelihood at risk, like where you dwell, where you sleep, where you eat, where you, in this country especially, where you essentially validate your identity, right? You need for anything, you need your address to be able to present your address to people as much as you present your driver's license or ID card, right? So all of that is at stake, and you're one individual and you're trying to navigate a lot of different problems, and the effect of the institution is usually one of oppression, because it's not one of meeting you where you are and helping you to come to a natural resolution with a process that is obviously very inefficient and recognized as such on the part of the institution. But it's not that. It's oppression. It's tough shit. Like your SOL, like you're going to be evicted. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. It's all of those things. But then there's a third dimension here. There's the individual, there's the macro social understanding of the institution, but then there's the people that work there every day. And they're there, and they're not necessarily identifying with the goals, purpose, the spirit of the institutional mission. Gainesville Housing Authority, we're there to get you home. Like whatever ridiculous, like tagline they'd have. But there's probably something cheesy like that identifies like, this is who we are, here to help, right? Those people aren't identifying with that. Like, they're not agents of housing help, right? They're just there, they're at work, and they got a meeting, and like Barbara's like being a bitch and this and that, it's like all those things. And so what ends up happening is this huge disconnect. Like, they're just like, who are you? Like usually human beings that approach these, now let's remind everyone, social service agencies, right? To serve the social good, right? And when a person who comprises society, like you, approaches that person, that's out of everything, out of the staff meeting, out of that call that they have to get on, out of those emails that they have to answer, out of that training they have to go to, the aspect of their job that they like the least is dealing with human beings, even though that should be the pinnacle of what it is that they do. Like, I'm here today because I work in social service, right? Like that's essentially like what I do. And don't get me wrong, folks, people annoy the crap out of me, right? Even in a counseling developmental space, a therapeutic space, people can be fucking annoying. But I know that's what I'm there for. That's what I'm there to do. This is what I've committed my life to. And if you're at housing it shouldn't be like working at Google, right? Like if you're at housing, you should be good to go to deal with people. If you're a Google
Yeah.
engineer, you are absolutely justified in not wanting to be around people. You just want to be around computers and stare at screens and become a hunchback and make gazillions of dollars, right? So that's okay in that context. Well, that's another stream. But in this context, there's that huge disconnect, and I wonder if that's part of why institutions have so much power. It's because all the people, like we talk about organizing, right? Organizing against um, oppression that comes from justice spaces like courts and places of incarceration, organizing against healthcare abuse, organizing against housing abuse, organizing against uh like essentially the horror of an institution coming and taking your kids away in terms of all the departments of children and families or their variations nationwide, the nightmares of trauma that puts on children and essentially mothers. So not that many fathers involved in those spaces, though there are. I wonder if they have that much power because we're trying to organize from the outside in, but if all those human beings who work in those places are like, no, this is not a good way to do this. We need to know we're going to help these people because I live in the same community as those people who come here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that. And I wonder if that could be something, right? Because it's not that right now.
Yeah.
Do you find it's not that, or have you had different experiences where you're like, no, there's some good eggs in there who really,
It's even hard to get at the good eggs because the good eggs have been hard boiled a couple of times. Like,
yeah,
and I'm
or
speaking,
they just don't make it there.
I'm speaking in two different like aspects. Like I know working for a corporation is like, or like a, still like it's the same type of thing, and I also know what it's like to work for a place like say a nonprofit, that's like, here to do good for the community. And in both of those spaces, a person, to like go the extra mile for a person is like basically for me, like I'm not a popular person in those spaces because I'm like too humanistic. They're like, but take a different road, street sister, like you're here in the, this is how we do things here. And like often I feel like often you're either pushed out of those spaces or crushed down in those places. And since for me, my experience was like pushing back as much and letting it be known the whole time that I was there, like, where I could, like, this is not right. Like, that's not how I see it. Like, this is what I came in saying I wanted to do. I've been the same. I've stuck to the same thing. It's other things that have changed. It's your, whatever, like that has changed. It's not that I'm doing something different or new. And I will say that honestly, to this day, I feel the effects of not like going in that direction, not like going and re-engaging with that community. It's like, alumni, like because of how harmful it was, and traumatizing very much so. Like for me as like just getting into, service, like wanting to give back and really wanting to affect a community that I very much am a part of, yeah. So anyways, I
well, let's because you went there relative to a recent experience,
yeah.
recent few years that you've had, let's kind of go a little deeper into that. I mean, this was an organization, a community-based organization that hired you on as essentially a developing community leader, right? Like the idea with the nonprofit funding that this organization received was to take you, who is what they term a an impacted person in the community. And folks, what impacted person in community means is someone who is on the other side of social privilege.
I was gonna say
So
the tracks.
yeah, or the other side of the tracks, as people used to say, right? And it's usually people who exist and live in communities of color, very low income, low socioeconomic status, communities that are heavily policed, and people's cause and effect paradigm is essentially do and be incarcerated or do and get away with it. And like that's a difficult circumstance to live in. And it's usually that kind of intentionality because there's no access to anything, to help, to support, to employment, to childcare so that you can get employment, to um, any type of helping hand relative to healthcare so that you can live a healthy life of wellness so you can sustain employment. Kind of seeing the connections here, folks. Like so in those spaces people are facing a real sense of existential dread, like what is my being in this world, right? And that is one of many. You represented one of many such communities, as did colleagues of yours, came into the space, and the idea was to advocate, strategize, develop a system of change to address different things, like one real world problem. And that's what the idea was: come and bring real world issues and we will investigate, we will examine, we will interrogate those issues and come up with strategic plans, action plans to address those issues. One of those issues for you was the dearth of transportation that connected at that time an incredibly large but kind of segregated community on one, not the other side of the tracks. It was just on the other side of like a horrible death trap of a highway, and there was hardly any transportation to do anything, to go shopping, to there was, I mean, there was like a gas, I mean, again, yet again, where did people go to buy food for their family? A gas station, convenience store. Yeah, right. So you wanted to address these issues, and amongst others, and the more you expressed communication, planning, whatever the case is, around some of these issues, like transportation, like housing, you were told that your expression would not go well with the audience that it was being communicated to, or the intention, which was leadership at the city level, leadership at the county level, leadership at the local nonprofit leaders level, leadership at a policy level with city planners and city managers. And folks, there's a very, like, that is a majority of people who exist in white privilege, because especially in Florida and in North Florida, that is a white supremacist informed infrastructure that is historic. We're going to get into how that history is trying to be quite literally whitewashed a little bit later, but that So that doesn't mean everyone that's not, oh, it's like, oh, those places are run by white people. They are, but there's a lot of people of color there too who then dissociate from the communities of color that they are ostensibly there to serve.
Yeah.
And they dissociate so much that to the extent that your supervisors and your leadership at this community organization told you basically don't rock the boat. We don't want to upset these people. These are the people who sit in positions of power. And I remember, because I functioned as a liaison and an advisor to this organization and did some trainings with them, and I remember that was a very obvious but very ignored conflict of terms there. Like, we're precisely there to challenge the leadership. That's what it is, to shift the locus of power from that institutional space to the community space. So power to the people and all that, right? So
Yeah, but that wasn't actually that it very quickly that was my issue, is that it very quickly changed from that
right,
to like, oh, know your audience. And that's when I realized, like, oh, well, I think our audiences are different because,
right. Because
but
what was the audience that you wanted to address?
people that in the community.
Right. So we're getting at something here, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to address people, to shift the locus of power, to empower those people.
Yeah. I wanted to elevate their voices for real, not just like,
right. And these folks worked within the construct of the institutional space, multiple institutions, simply because that's the job. Like, that's what the work is. Change occurs through institutions, but we all know if an institution is functioning in a particular way, it's not going to, and that it's happy with, it's not going to change that. Why change it? What's the point of changing it? I mean, there are many people who will admit behind closed doors that there is a necessity for poverty, for oppressed classes, for subjugated classes. They must exist because they serve economic ends.
Yeah.
So why would they want to change anything? But the problem is, this organization that we're talking about, like many other organizations, spoke publicly that their particular aim is to create change by empowering communities.
Yeah. I mean, that it's a business. It winds up, that's the sad reality that I found out. It's a business, like you said, that like, unfortunately, it became very much like a bit, or like, maybe it always has been just very much a business to like, well, we take care of the poor. But it was like, that's not what was actually marketed to the, like,
The
impacted
community
people.
leaders, or
the
impacted
people who were hired, and it just, like, you have to either your convictions outweigh like the benefit of like this privileged space, or you're like, I value this space even if it's not what I thought it was before, and so I'm just gonna like push whatever frustration I have down and just do it. And I found it like I couldn't just push it down. Like, it was really affecting my work. It was affecting my health. It was like, I really thought it was a thing. And so I had to rock the boat, I couldn't be the only person. I couldn't be the only person holding that weight because it was wrong, and so.
Well, why did it affect you and not necessarily the others?
Because I don't know, I was on the ground. Like, I was like, I was that was my goal. It wasn't about having a job or making money. And oh my God, I remember actually saying that to my boss, like basically, well, she was my boss at the time, but like, and this bitch really said back to me, like, well, really, it is. Like, and it wasn't, this was about my personal life at the time, but it was just like, oh, damn, you know what I mean? Like a lot of things like that that I just could not ignore because my, like, no matter what, ignorance was in her head because that is how she thinks. I was serious. It might sound cliche, but it wasn't about the money for me.
Right.
I would have, you know what I mean? Like I would have done something that I didn't have to put my heart into. Like, you know what I'm saying? For real, it wasn't about that. So further down the line, when I went, since I have not engaged and because I just honestly don't believe in that organization,
Right.
you know, and that long, you know, that speaking about, which is it's back with the, you know, the institutional like trauma and even that power, like the long reaching arm, which is not, the effects are not felt that majorly, but it does make me think of how just messed up that system is, that, you know, something that's supposed to be building community leaders, you can later affect that leader and like, well, not that position, not that position. If you're on the board of everything, you know, like you could be like, nah, not that one. That's a
Right.
problem
So
person.
so what you're talking about is the leadership of your prior organization expanding their institutional reach by consolidating power
Mm-hmm.
amongst different local institutions. So that is always not a good thing if power is consolidated amongst a few. Um, and what we're talking about, which is kind of getting into, you know, where we've come to here for tonight, is this idea of institutional power, right? Um, let's take a look at this definition, right? So the term institutional power, another term for structural power, refers to the ways in which power, such as authority, wealth, and other privileges, is arranged in order to influence the norms of society, institutions, and our interpersonal relationships. So that's covering a lot from the small to the large. You're able to exert power, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to come back to that idea that it is quite remarkable, even though people and even though these individuals of color would deny it themselves, it's quite remarkable that people of color accept any amount of this power, knowing that their use of that power is going to subjugate and oppress people of color just like them. And they'll convince themselves like, well, they worked hard for it and that's what these people need to do. But folks, that's what the white people say too, right? So the idea here becomes, why would individuals of color, or let's just say people who come from even a community base in which they've lived under multiple intersectional institutional oppression,
Mm-hmm.
and become some of the individuals in your group of leaders who were like, you know, becoming community leaders, they stuck with this organization because they accepted power that they know they themselves at different times felt disenfranchised by, right? And that's what institutional power does. It gives you a little bit so that you join the larger system. And like one of my good friends, you know, who works for the University of Florida here, you know, and he is essentially an individual who disagrees with much of what that institution does in terms of utilizing and at times abusing its power. He personally cannot go against it because he's so invested. He's a higher up person, making good money, living a good life, and he doesn't want to jeopardize that personal stake in order to fight the power. Fight the powers that be, right? Like Chuck D said. So this is one other thing. I'll just say this: it's a perennial concern is not merely the existence of power, but the disparities or imbalances of power that result in poorer health for the less powerful. Folks, power only gets stronger by stepping on the necks of others. That's it. 1,000 people will argue with me about that, but you're all fucking wrong. The only way that power consolidates is if it is taken away from others and those people are stepped on in order to maintain that power. So that's what we're moving into, right? Like you had people that were close to you that came from similar circumstances that you did, who were like, nah, I think I'm just gonna not look at that and take this power because this job is good.
I think into what really was my motivator is that I saw that I didn't see like the job as what was, my personal gain. I saw like my personal gain was tied in with the people I wanted to help. You know what I mean? Like,
well, ostensibly
like,
because like, you were one of those people.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't just like, oh, this job is so sweet, so I don't want to do like, I'm like, no, that's the long game. That's more beneficial to actually empower people and listen to what our community, like people in our community, are saying that is needed and needs to change. Like,
right. So
for me, that was like equal to the money. Yeah, of course you need money to pay for your rent and your electric and everything, but that was supposed to be the point.
Yeah.
Get paid to do some good. Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's I like that. I was just thinking about this, right? I want to see if not that just yet, but let's see. A little something here. Okay, so it occurs to me that every time I pull this up, everybody gets to see the crazy ass shit that I watch. Yeah. Like from
oh my God,
ultimate adventure biking to this weird ass, I mean, these are all excellent channels though, to baseball, to like, weird like Tales of Pachamama, to like, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't mind it, but it feels kind of vulnerable. Like, like everyone's like, looking at my like thing.
Yeah.
But whatever. I don't give a fuck.
I love it. And yeah, you obviously don't, because you just like highlight it and take us all the way down through it. Like, yep.
Hang on. Okay, so let's see if we can find this, because was appropriated. So I'm typing it in that way because what I'm looking for, let's just see if they history of a movement, blah, blah, means to an 11-year-old, blah, 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 blah. No one's going to have like what I'm disappointed. I figure somebody would have, so the idea that I'm looking for is this, right? I'm looking for the idea that, Black Lives Matter began as a movement of the people. When power was consolidated amongst the leaders of the Black Lives movement, and then they started going into more institutional spaces, like constantly speaking on CNN and podcasts and like, all sorts of news stations and stuff like that, it became something else. It was no longer what it was when it was being like, it was people on the streets. There was decentralized leadership. That means there was no like single, like, I am the leader, sort of like the Occupy movement, Occupy Wall Street, right?
Mhm.
And the 99% and stuff like that. All those things have come and gone because it was no longer amongst those people. It became institutionalized, meaning it had leaders and a chain of
Structure, yeah.
command and structural like organizational demands. And people always say, like, well, you need to do that in order to manage things well.
Policies.
Right. But those things always turn into impotent, like where's BLM? When's the last time you heard about that? You know,
I
the
like
shit is 3 years ago at the earliest, 2 years ago. Right. Let's just
That so
see.
hurts too. Like,
Yeah, let's
it,
see what this is a short one. I want to
mhm.
just play that to see like what this might tell us about it.
What started as a hashtag in 2013 went from trending on social media to becoming one of the largest movements in American history. Black Lives Matter started with a Facebook post by one of its founders, Alicia Garza. Her post, entitled "A Love Letter to Black People," was a dedication to the Black community after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the killing of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. She ended with the words, "Black people, I love you, I love us, our lives matter." Garza and her friends Patrice Cullors and Opal Tometi coined the hashtag Black Lives Matter later that year. As the hashtag
So at that point, it was definitely people who had some operational power because they were obviously established organizers. Sure. So that's what it takes. I mean, I'm not saying things just like manifest without leadership or direction or whatever. It's necessary. But as we'll see, it's not just, it's like it began with them, but it also ended with them. Those particular individuals with all sorts of controversy and weird stuff. But it was most effective when it was scenes of people on the street gathering to bring not only attention, but condemnation and judgment to terrible shit that was happening relative to cops just in that stretch of time while it was really huge, just fucking killing black men every other month. You know, like I was what where do we live, right? So let's just keep that in mind, right? It yeah, they did great. They started something. That's what happens, right?
its popularity grew, so did backlash with the rise of White Lives and All Lives Matter groups. The number of Black victims of police brutality also grew, making the slogan increasingly important. In 2014, the deaths of Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, and Michael Brown ignited the movement and protests nationwide. But it was the death of Michelle Cusseau that same year that began Say Her Name, a subsection of the Black Lives Matter movement that focuses on Black women who have lost their lives to police violence. It quickly rose in popularity and was used in protests for the deaths of Sandra Bland and then Breonna Taylor. In 2019, places where BLM protests occurred had a 20% decrease in killings by police. Local protests also increased the amount of police body cams and community policing initiatives. In 2020, as many as 26 million people participated in demonstrations protesting the killing of George Floyd. By the end of the year, Black Lives Matter raised $90 million, which went to expenses like crisis intervention, civic engagement, and grassroots funding. The killing of George Floyd also changed the demographics of support towards Black Lives Matter. Nearly 95% of the protests happened in majority white counties. Today, there are 3 entities of Black Lives Matter, including the nonprofit BLM Global Network Foundation.
Now, this is the problem, right? Like because, all right, I'll say this in one sense, through a lot of the developmental work that I did in my doctoral research and my work, it wasn't just about individuals that I was, there was a lot of stuff about identity development in individuals, but there was a lot that I did about organizational development as well, which is to say groups of people, in multiple sizes and whatnot. And when the focus of a movement shifted from the focus of the movement to running an organization, historically you'll see every one of them fell off in terms of what they can do, because it just becomes an accepted thing. Then it's not really challenging institutional authority as this did, which forced the institutions of law enforcement and the justice system to respond because there was too much heat. To now, what? Right? So that's what I'm trying to get at. Do you see that in terms of what, even on a smaller scale, the effects of the community organization you worked for yielded, right? Like where, like its trajectory, was it like similar in the sense of started with some really good stated intentions to like, this is my organization, and this is how we,
it started, it's always when you have to chase the money, like
that's unfortunate.
It is that is what loses everyone. Like
money.
That's what it is when you have to chase the money, because it's not just like, all right, here's the money and then go do whatever you're gonna do. It's like, prove yourself, show that what you're doing, like show us the numbers.
Why is money necessary?
That's where the focus changed.
Why is the funding necessary?
The funding, or you mean like money from?
Well, I'm just saying, why is money and the management of money and the application of money, it's like people, 100 people would say you're being so stupid. Of course money is necessary to organize and to bring people together and spaces and media like blasts and stuff like that. Yes, but the real effects of Black Lives Matter happened just because a shit ton of people got pissed, got together, and forced the hand. No policy changes, no review of policy papers, just stop fucking killing people.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you have to chase the money and to do this because you have to organize, and we have to have the 2024 conference in San Diego. And it's like,
and that's when people you gotta have the meeting, and then that's when people get turned away. Like today, like I've not been the person that turned someone away, but like I have had to send a rejection letter. I've also been the person that like, hey, I'm so sorry you had to leave. Pregnant person, please come back. I will meet you anywhere to like give you this benefit, because it just seems so cruel that, oh, we had a hard day at the office, like let's turn a person away, or we're in a meeting, like we can't help you, person. We're probably in a meeting talking about helping people.
Yeah, there's just something so attractive to the empowerment through like institutional identity and your relationship to it, right? Like they love these, like the political action community, the global network, the grassroots foundation. It's like, it's exciting. Like those are cool titles. I remember being with one of actually an affiliate community organization that was more involved in the justice, space. I remember gathering with a bunch of people because I was involved in that organization. And we spent this very heated, like hours-long meeting about the fucking name.
The name
of the organization. And I was just like, what are you doing? What are we doing? This is not, I mean, I get it. I get why these things are great and exciting and you could hold power. But the thing is, if you're just, think of these things, if you're just becoming another institution, you're not shifting the locus of power from institutions to people. You're just shifting it from one institution to another institution, even though you're saying, but we represent the people. Yeah, so do fucking senators and congressmen. How well does that go, Congress people? How well has that gone? Are our Congress folks, are our elected representatives representing us well? Are they using institutional power to the benefit of the most oppressed and disenfranchised members of the communities? Let's see.
Let's
take a look. Let's take a look at what they're doing.
The state of Florida that recently, according to our Department of Education, told teachers you are now legally required to tell students how slaves learned some pretty cool things while being slaves. They didn't. They used them for their personal benefit, is what teachers now have to say. You learn skills the slaves did that they could use for their personal benefit. You know, like during the slave retirement plans that also didn't exist. But anyway, after assaulting history, after assaulting critical race theory to the point where we've had to ban certain math books for allegedly being too woke here in the state of Florida, our Republican-controlled government actually has approved a new set of curriculum that is now available for teachers in the state. And that curriculum happens to be coming from PragerU, the right-wing nonprofit group that puts out little videos like Why I Left the Left. They have a new program for kids that is now approved, even though it's not accredited, but it's approved for use in Florida public schools. Let me read you this statement from PragerU CEO Marissa Streit. Ms. Streit said, "We have seen that our schools have been hijacked by the left. They have been politicized. They have been used by union bosses. They have been doing everything under the sun, not for our children. And so we have launched PragerU Kids, and we started providing great edutainment, educational entertainment for children across America. But we didn't just stop there. Now we're actually making turnkey curriculum, content for your schools. And the state of Florida just announced that we are now becoming an official vendor. This means that if you are a teacher in Florida, you cannot be fired for using PragerU content."
Let's just take a moment and realize how insidious that is. PragerU is a private corporation that is overtly expressive of its conservative, Republican, and at times alt-right beliefs that have just said, this is happening in the state of Florida. The education, or in general, education is just too leftist. So we want to do this. And from this institutional space, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has used the public institutional space to empower them, a corporation, to change the way that public education is administered. That's huge.
Yeah.
However, the problem here is this statement about hijacked by the left, politicized, used by union bosses. What they're talking about is all the power struggles with teacher unions and the left-leaning kind of landscape of education in general, because I've come from that, and yes, there's a lot of people who are left-leaning in that space and are very good and progressive in certain areas, but at the same time, they are just like the community organizations we've worked with that are also left-leaning. Anybody who's helping the oppressed is generally believing in that particular space. They're leaning into the left progressive ideologies. But when they and Black Lives Matter and the educational unions, the teachers unions, try to consolidate power and get into the political kind of, not I'm trying to achieve something here, but political game,
Mm-hmm.
then they're making this type of thing available to do. This is just a response at this point. It's a nightmare, but it's responding to people who are ostensibly organized to help oppressed populations and marginalized communities. When they get into the political game, then they're essentially inviting this kind of responsiveness from the other side, because it's a duality at that point. It's the left versus the right. Like the development of our kids isn't a left or right thing, is it?
No. It's really not. Yeah.
Nor is it a Christian or a Muslim thing, or is it a like gender, like diverse to gender traditional thing. It's just kids learning about everything there is in life and being able to learn how to make decisions about what they want to relate to and how they want to develop their own identity in response to what they're learning. That should be what our focus is, and yet it's become this. Now, go ahead while I pull something else up.
It feels very much like people like parents fighting over the kids in court, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
using their kids to get at each other and stuff. It's like you're like to maintain power and like, you know, control like not only what's going on presently but the future. It's just like, let's brainwash.
Yeah.
Instead of like teaching, it's no longer education or anything. It's just like, let's brainwash them so that they,
well, it's indoctrination into our side of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, that's horrible. That is absolutely the right.
And the fact that our children's future is the battleground, it's another battleground for left versus right, for political divisiveness, right? That's the real problem. So let's take a look at what Ron is allowing teachers to, without any repercussion or accountability, teach kids, meaning in the classrooms of your kid's going to school tomorrow, my kid going to school tomorrow, right? Let's see what's happening here. Let's take a look at, this is about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Leo and Layla are our cutesy, you know, our little kids here that go to deal with things. So let's see what this one is. Can't believe I'm helping the algorithm.
No, Leo, that's too many balloons. You need to spread them out or else it's gonna look too busy.
But it's the 4th of July! I don't think there could ever be enough red, white, and blue anything.
Ugh, we've been arguing all day. Planning this party with you was a huge mistake.
You're telling me.
Well, just keep
You're
saying.
so nitpicky.
Okay, do you see what their
I'm sorry that
do you see the flags?
Mm-hmm.
The original 13 colonies.
The OG.
Like,
wow.
That's the real shit. Not what we have here. Definitely not Puerto Rico. So
I want the party to look nice. Whatever. I'm gonna see if Maria and Olive want to help me set things up the right way. Do me a favor and don't talk to me for the rest of the day. We need a break from each other.
Damn. It's like Carmen Sandiego.
I think I'll write him. No, he should be the one to write me first. It is the 4th of July, after all. A momentous day for the both of us. Goodness gracious me!
No way. President Thomas Jefferson?
I think what my brother is trying to say is, hello, nice to meet you, sir. My name is Layla, and this is my very excited little brother, Leo. We're from the future.
Fascinating. Well,
probably
I am
raped her.
delighted to make your acquaintance. What brings you to the cabinet
In real
room
life.
here at my estate, Monticello?
Actually, I have no idea. It's like the time travel app sent us here on its own, probably to learn something. 1 second, Layla and I are arguing about silly balloons for our 4th of July
What are they gonna
party.
learn?
And the next thing we know, we're here. It's probably a good thing.
Nothing real.
Leo and I were getting on each other's nerves all day.
You were quarreling?
You have no idea. I felt like I couldn't do anything right.
This makes me
And
want
Layla
to
kept
hurt
getting on my
myself.
case
It
for
is so
every
Bro, like, this
little
is
thing.
torture.
That's because
I
you
know.
weren't listening to me.
Because they're just
I
annoying.
believe I've determined the
Really
reason for your
shitheads.
visit. I'm in the midst of a quarrel of my own with
Okay.
someone who is almost
So
like a
all
brother
this is
to
the
me.
lead up.
A
What's the
very
quarrel
stubborn
about?
man by the name of John Adams.
Like President John Adams?
Yes, the very one. He and I were very close, even though we disagreed on mostly all of our political views. Many things have led to the disintegration of our friendship, and we haven't spoken in years.
That's sad. You don't think you can make up? Friends fight and make up all the time.
That is true. Before your arrival, I was deliberating as to whether or not I should write him, in an attempt to make amends. In our old age, we don't have much time to waste. Perhaps I should set my grudge
So we
aside
gotta
and
poison
begin
the
a letter
youth
to
with
my
this
fellow founder
garbage.
on this glorious 4th
Let's
of
see what they're saying.
Pass? I was just about to sit down to a delicious meal Abigail had prepared for me at our family farm.
Things gonna get better if you just yell at each other.
Leo's right. Let's
I was fearful of an all-powerful central government.
Okay.
Of course I understood, you Virginian swan. But couldn't you understand that a strong central government would have helped to ensure our young country's survival in the very beginning? How could you possibly deny that?
Who are you calling a Virginian swan? You pigeon-livered poltroon?
I have no idea.
together might have been a bad idea.
Have you also forgotten about your treachery when we ran against each other for the
Well, this is like going in weird directions because it's not really giving a particular lesson that they're trying to.
That's exactly the point.
You know,
like you don't need to know history, just watch this ratchet shit.
Okay, how about let's go to one that will
God.
be a little bit more like, how about Leo and Layla meet Martin Luther King Jr.?
Oh Jesus.
Let's take a look and see how this is going to work.
Hey, Layla.
Not now, Leo. I need to be alone.
Okay. I just want you to know that I think it's really great what you did today. Meet him. He's like the king. Get it?
Yeah, I get it.
The king of standing up for what's right. Let's go talk to him.
Okay, if anybody can help, it'll be him.
Okay, let's see what they need help with. What's the problem she's having?
We as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Whoa, that's him all right.
This was a good idea. Let's go meet him. Excuse us, Dr. King. I'm Layla, and this is my brother Leo.
We're from the future, and my sister here stood up for what's right. Because her friends are being mean about it, she isn't sure if she should have.
We have a holiday for you and learn about your I Have a Dream speech every year. You're famous for standing up for what's right, and it would be cool to learn more about that from you.
Do you have a little time?
I can always make time for those who stand up to injustice and who have the courage to right wrongs.
Have you always stood up for what's right?
Well, from a very early age, I was aware of right and wrong, and when I detected wrong, it gave me a horrible feeling. As a young boy, perhaps just a few years younger than you, Leo, my favorite playmate was a boy near my age who also happened to be white. Once we started school, because of my skin color, he was no longer allowed to play with me.
That's terrible.
It was, and unfair to me, and it made me angry. But my parents gave me a lesson that has guided me for the rest of my life. They taught me that racism, thinking people are better than or lesser than because of skin color, is wrong, and to hate the wrong but never the wrongdoer.
Wow, that's so noble.
My Christian faith directs me.
There's
Yeah,
the
so-
lesson, guys.
It's I mean, it's important to like it's sly, right? So it's
Yeah.
like slowly but surely. So okay.
Said, basically, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bro.
Uh,
Jesus Christ. They had to really do all this cheesy shit for this
I know.
indoctrination.
Let's see. Let's see.
To love my neighbors, even when they act in ways I don't like. And that's always helped me remain peaceful.
You've experienced lots of racism, huh?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, in my time, there are plenty of hateful and ignorant people that haven't let go of racism. So most Black Americans
In
have
my time.
experienced it, but here in 1968 in the South, it has been particularly difficult for Black people because of legal racial segregation.
That's when people are separated because of their race, right?
Yes, that's it. And while the defeat of the
that's
South
not
in the
it.
Civil War led to the outlawing of slavery, racism, however, still remained. And new laws were made to keep white and Black people separate.
Didn't people fight against the new laws?
Yes, but in 1896, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was indeed permitted. They said things like schools, swimming pools, bathrooms, movie theaters, and such could be separate for white only or Black only, as long as they were equal.
But if people are kept separate, isn't it harder to learn that racism is bad? So the bad behavior just continues?
That's very insightful of you, Miss Layla, and I couldn't agree more with you. When I was a young man, I spent time working in desegregated Connecticut and went to college in desegregated Massachusetts. In each place, the races mixed freely. And without segregation, it is much easier to have friendships and relationships with people of different races.
Wait, so in the South, if there was still a lot of racism, were the things that were separate ever really equal?
Almost never, and not just unequal, but most Black-only services were far worse than their white counterpart. However, one place where the races couldn't be separated was on public transportation. Cities in the South didn't have the money for 2 sets of buses, so whites and Blacks had to mix, sort of.
Ugh, this isn't gonna be good.
Blacks in the back and whites in the front. And Blacks were only permitted to sit if there were extra seats after white passengers were all seated.
But what about Rosa Parks? She didn't give up her seat.
That's right, Mr. Leo. I'm pleased that future children remember that. Rosa was a good friend of mine in Montgomery, Alabama, where I had my first job as a pastor. And after she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat, I organized the Black community and led a boycott, where we all agreed not to take the bus until the laws were changed and we received justice.
You stood up for what's right.
And it was very difficult. During our organized protest, I even spent time in jail after being unfairly arrested, and my home was bombed.
What?
Yes, thankfully no one was harmed. Through it all, though, our protests remained peaceful. I believe with all my heart in nonviolence. 2 wrongs never make a right, and you can never defeat hate with hate.
I guess it's good you didn't punch those bullies.
No kidding, but I did yell at them.
Sometimes a situation requires us to passionately raise our voices. You should hear some of my speeches.
We have. They're great.
If your conscience tells you to apologize for yelling, then listen to it. But perhaps those bullies required some amplified volume. As long as you didn't threaten or insult them, I wouldn't feel too bad.
Thanks, Dr. King.
One great secret about using nonviolence to fight back is that by taking the high road and not sinking to the level of people who are being mean, you can actually make a bigger impact on them than with a violent act like a punch.
I wasn't mean to my friends who laughed and went along with the bullying. I just said I was shocked and disappointed that they could be so cruel. I kind of took the high road. Do you think that's why they won't talk to me?
I do. And since you did the right thing and they didn't, they might be struggling with some disappointment in themselves. Don't worry, Miss Layla. If they're the kind of friends who are worth having, they'll be back after they've reflected on their actions and let go of their pride enough to apologize.
Oh, tell us about the I Have a Dream speech. My teacher played it
So,
for us.
There's a, to me, what's coming across is very subtle, right?
Mhm.
And what it is similar to what we were talking about with Black Lives Matter and with other social movements, where it's being kind of sanitized and made innocent and very like, you just have to be respectful, but stand up for what you believe in. And it's like, but that's the reality, that there is such violence that comes through institutional oppression. you're basically putting the burden of people who are speaking out against that to be civil and polite and kind. Like, so, like,
and let's not forget that whatever he said about his house being bombed and no one was hurt is completely a moot point, because he was fucking like, and he was the peaceful protester and they fucking murdered him.
Yeah. That's why they were like, do you have time to talk to us? And he's like, oh, I have time. Like, you die this year, man. It's 1968. Like, that's you don't have the time. So it's kind of insidious. I don't know the way that
and then too, you got to think too, as they're just getting into schools too, like as it becomes like a friendly, acceptable thing, like you can, after people like, kids and even teachers like are used to using it, and it's like, oh, okay, we're like, you can slip whatever you want in there, once you get your foot in the door.
I mean, we're going to go deeper into the Florida curriculum stuff. I just wanted to like explore a little bit of this.
It's
like,
definitely,
today.
I'll just say that one little thing, I don't have it on my desk right now, but there's this, I've mentioned the, one, like my kids bringing home little pamphlets, little like leaflets that, are about history, different things about history. And you can tell it's so whitewashed. There's no really other way to express it, and I just remember one thing. There's one about the Constitution. I think I told you about that one, but then there was another one later on, and it was about, I want to say it was Susan B. Anthony. Wait, am I saying the right person? Like, is for the women's right to vote, right? But the way, okay, so this was the way, it was one page on there where it was like, she was fighting for, women's right to vote. Black men could vote, but women still couldn't vote. And it was just like, it was very like subtle. It was just like, but why was it a need to distinguish that Black men could vote, but like, like, well, if Black men can vote, then we should definitely be able to vote. Like, I didn't think that was something that needed to be.
It wasn't a necessary distinction.
Right,
like,
at all.
You didn't need to,
It was things like that, that is like,
it's subtle. It's subtle.
It's funny because that's exactly what I was thinking about as I was like, just, editing and even preparing for tonight, just the subtle cues in which your institutional trauma can be like reignited, the things that I brought up even before on the last, on a past episode was just like, it might not bother everyone, right? But it's just like, if you say a specific thing to a specific person. I've actually been in a situation like that where, no one else, I was in a, I brought up definitely here, but I was in a relationship that was very violent, and there was subtle things like he could say one thing and it's just normal or whatever, but I know that he's threatening me in that thing, that that message was passed along purposely because
it's
it was
encoded language.
It's encoded, and that, just like you said before about like white supremacy being like the blanket that's wrapped around us all, or it's woven into our society, and that's what the cold sweats is about. Like, okay, I know I'm going to experience this completely shocking thing or this jolt that not only reminds me but adds to the trauma that I have.
Yeah. And that's the larger thing. Like, civil exchange is not a salve for violent oppression. It's not going to work that way. And that's the thing where, like, sanitizing this for kids it's just not a good move on multiple fronts. Like, if anything, kids should really just see things for what they are.
Yeah.
Like because it's what they live in.
I wish I could remember the and I don't have my phone even to look, but I was looking up, I don't know how I found this person, but it was somebody who was actually she was like, it was tools for teachers and also parents, you know, for telling children about our history, the truth about our history, without it. She still did it in a way that was like just telling the truth and not like giving them like her own emotion or their, you know, anyone's emotion about behind it, of the pain behind it, but like the real truth, like this is what happened. This is what happened in a very matter-of-fact way, and also in a way that was digestible for very young children, but it was the truth. It wasn't like all this like, let's lie, you know, or let's make it seem like it wasn't as bad as, you know, what it really was.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. It's you can communicate things with some protective factors in place for children, but you don't have to diminish what's actually happened.
Yeah. I feel like we've had this conversation even just for like personal, like how detrimental it can be for a child in their own personal life to ignore or not to really talk about and process what's really occurring in their life, whether it be with a sibling, a parent, you know, like what you have to be honest about who your parents are. Like, you know, we definitely deal as adults with, you know, the traumas of our youth, but like what if you do actually have that guidance to be like, we can deal with some of this now, you know, but this is the opposite of that. And
yeah, I mean, because like the effects even of this that we're watching is just to like, hey, come on, it's not that bad. Just calm down. It's, you know, we can talk about this in a good. It's diminishing the violent effects of institutional trauma. Decades, generations of it, centuries, right? So that this is insidious in that way. But let's round out tonight. Let's give Frederick Douglass. He'll be the last one here. Let's see what Layla and Leo have to say about him. We'll give Frederick a shot here.
That's right, Bob. Despite some violence and destruction by some of our angrier activists, we're seeing mostly peaceful protests.
Protesters are demanding that the police be abolished.
Well, Clint, these local activists want to abolish the police. They're claiming systematic oppression and want the U.S. system torn down.
What is going
why does it have to be in that tone? Like, that's such a weird, like, oh, some of the less
some of our angrier
angrier. It's like, wow, dude. Like,
say angry black person without saying angry black person.
Those are terrible, like, deliveries. Like, I mean, in terms of, it's so mocking. I mean,
we didn't have to wait. They already know their foot's in the door. So
what's going on? Things are so weird right now.
I know. Mrs. Calder gave us an assignment today about being
64.
activists for justice.
Isn't Mrs. Calder your math teacher?
Yeah. We learn math, but we spend a lot of time learning about the stuff they talk about in the news.
That's weird. Isn't math class supposed to be for math?
Why is everyone so angry? Are they burning a car? What does abolish even mean?
That's enough. Let's get to the bottom of this.
The app?
You got it. Abolitionist? Let's check this out. Hi, are you an abolitionist?
I am. My name is Frederick Douglass. Welcome to 1852.
Thanks. I recognize you from a picture in my U.S. history textbook. You have really cool hair.
I mean, why does he have to sound like
That's my brother, Leo.
Isaac Hayes?
We're trying to learn about activism and abolishing.
How y'all doing?
Can you help us?
Like, it's just...
Well, not to brag, but I'm the perfect guy for you to talk to. I'm the most famous activist in America, and I'm currently working on getting something abolished.
Abolish means to end, right? What are you wanting to get rid of?
I want slavery to end. At this time that you have come to visit, for half of the United States, it is okay for some people to own other people, make them work for many hours for no pay, and force them to do anything, anytime.
That's so unfair and horrible.
You're right. The sad fact is slavery has existed everywhere in the world for thousands of years.
Just by what he said, like several of those things continue to work now. And it's may not be working for no pay, but it's definitely underpaid. And then making people do anything you want at any time is what many people are forced to do in terms of meeting, just being able to keep employment or sustain employment, you know? And it's not just in like in lower SES designations, even in spaces that like I'd worked in kind of upper echelon spaces like universities, you know, kind of professionalized jobs. You think you're protected from that as opposed to working in and doing anything that is required in retail or in like food service. It's the same thing. Just work. I mean, if you choose not to work 12 hours a day, then, you know, people are constantly applying for these positions. It's like that kind of thing. So how is that, you know, I mean, that is another big topic that we can get to in terms of institutional trauma relative to employment spaces.
Yeah.
Because that, like labor, basically institutional trauma relative to labor. But anyway, let's keep going with what Frederick's saying here.
But it's especially disappointing here because America was founded on the idea of freedom. Yet so many black people are not free.
Are you a slave?
He quite literally just pointed and said, it's especially disappointing here while a guy was getting whipped and lashed. That's what he said. It's disappointing here.
Yeah, like this is a point of disappointment.
Oh my God.
Mr. Douglas?
I was, but not anymore. I was born a slave, and I was taken from my family at the age of 6.
That's just so terrible. How did you deal with that?
It was very hard, and I was often sad. But I taught myself to read and write, and like I always say, knowledge is the pathway from slavery to freedom. As a boy, I was regularly beaten. But when I was 21, I had had enough and escaped to the north, where slavery is against the law, and have never looked back. Today, I am a free American, fighting for all to be free.
How can there be...
Did you catch the like knowledge with big pomp and circumstance? Knowledge is the pathway to freedom. Like, this is the insidious thing. It's because at that point, what it's saying, the implication there is, you know, if you're not getting a good education, or if you're not availing yourself of the free education that we have, then that's your choice. That's your decision. That's your failing at that point. If you're not making it forward, it's just because you're not availing yourself of the educational opportunities that are afforded to you.
Yeah. That's very much like the pulling yourself up by the bootstrap.
Yeah.
Like just chewed up.
That's
and spat
essentially
back
what he
out.
was saying there, or being made to say. This is not what
It was
these
very
folks have
much
said.
It was very much like pay attention very much to this.
know.
Like Jesus.
So let's see. Let's go a little further with it.
slavery in America when the founding fathers said that all men are created equal.
Yeah, and I've heard that some of those founding fathers owned slaves. What about that?
Children, our founding fathers knew that slavery was evil and wrong, and they knew that it would do terrible harm to the nation.
Okay.
They wanted it to end,
But?
but their first priority was getting all 13 colonies to unite as one country. The southern colonies were dependent on slave labor, and they wouldn't have joined a union that had banned it.
Are you okay with that?
I'm certainly not okay with slavery, but the founding fathers made a compromise to achieve something great, the making of the United States. If they immediately outlawed slavery after winning independence, the southern colonies would have formed their own slave-owning country. Our founders created a system they thought would have slavery end gradually.
Well, we're here in 1852, and America's been around for about 75 years. You're still trying to get slavery abolished. It doesn't sound like the system the founding fathers set up is working.
On the contrary, all the northern states outlawed slavery by 1804, and buying slaves from Africa was outlawed for the whole country 4 years later.
What's taking the southern states so long to do what's right?
Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep in the course of ages.
Huh?
What I mean is, sometimes things are more
That's what I'm
complicated
saying.
than they might seem, and complicated problems take time to solve.
When I have a complicated math problem, if I rush to solve it, I make mistakes.
Leo, ending slavery is such a bigger deal than your math problems.
It certainly is, Layla. Along with independence and democracy, it's probably America's biggest deal. There was no real movement anywhere in the world to abolish slavery before the American founding. Slavery was part of life all over the world. It was America that began the conversation to end it. But Leo is correct that big
Are they still
problems need to
talking?
be approached very carefully. Have you kids heard of William Lloyd Garrison?
No?
Nope.
He's an abolitionist.
Okay, so we'll pause it there.
They're nasty.
I mean that's it's
Bro, they
there's just this like very like just calm down. Everybody just be calm, relax. It's not as big a deal as we're making it out to be. There's just this communication that why this is dangerous is because it's going to achieve exactly what conservatives want to achieve, which is to diminish activism and to have everybody just relax and maintain the status quo. And the problem is that, complicated problems take a long time to solve is an excuse for those problems and their effects right into 2023 are not waning. They are sustaining and mutating into different problems.
Yeah.
If slavery has been abolished, we have to really honestly take a look at and ask ourselves why we are sustaining systems of incarceration in the way that we are, because that is essentially what needs to now be abolished, which is prison slavery. But we're not going to look at that because activism is going to be diminished, calmed down, reduced.
And they're definitely trying to reduce future, activism, future attempts and everything too. Like, just, make sure that kids coming into any kids that are left leaning or whatever, no matter what direction you're leaning, if you can put this in schools, then you're trying to affect the future to make sure, like, yeah, calm down, everybody, all the kids, like anybody that would be out there protesting, and making the police like actually check themselves, and not okay for you to be killing people in cold blood because you feel threatened or because you say you feel, I thought they sneezed wrong, they're Black while living. Like, that's what this, I can't believe not that I can't believe, I absolutely believe that PragerU is going to put out something like this, and the balance between like Martin Luther King was all, just breeze it in there, and then you can't really run from it. So they say some things, but it's that like just enough truth and said in just the right way to like flip it where it's not that bad. It's over. It's like a shot. It's over. But not if it's a shot of poison.
Yeah. We'll revisit this curriculum, this approach. There's a lot more to be examined, and as goes Florida, so too will other states go soon following. So we'll pay attention to it and revisit. So once again, thank you folks for joining us for Humanist Nightmare Fuel. We're going to close out this stream. We'll see you again when we continue to revisit issues of institutional and structural power, institutional betrayal, institutional trauma. There's a lot there, a lot of layers to explore. So once again,
Nadine Pueros.
And for me, Dr. Siraj, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Check you later.